Hello again. Okay, so we are on Recollection number 15. So let's see here. Again, where we left off. Again, we're playing Explorer's Guide, or our campaign setting is Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, and our tabletop RPG that we are playing is Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So now, the party is at the edges of the courtyard in this ancient ruins. Well, this cavern, this massive cavern that is beneath the forest ruins that they had been exploring in the previous recollection. And the incubus Brannick is waiting, and he calls out the challenge once more, Dragonborn, basically calling out to Vexen. So Vexen, the party's like, well, Vexen, he's calling to you. He's like, you decide what you want to do. So what he does is, Vexen, being the skis that he is, he decides to try and fire an arrow at him, but he misses. He rolled too low. So Brannick obviously deflects it with his sword, and he says, finally calls out to him once more. And then finally, Vexen accepts the challenge. And so he heads into this sort of subterranean courtyard. And they sort of exchange a few words, saying, it's like, I was waiting for this time, mano y mano, man to man. And, so the battle ensues. Now, Vexen has now been armed with a magical weapon, a short sword of warning, which allows him to cut through or negate Brannick's incubus resistance that allows him resistance to non-magical weapons. So now it's full damage. And Brannick now has a longsword, though. So first time they fought, he was barehanded or unarmed. So with that, now it's kind of an interesting fight. And as soon as it begins, basically Vexen decides to just run right in and essentially negate Brannick's range attacks. With that, Brannick pretty quickly into the fight ignites his longsword into an eruption of flame. So it was a flame-tongued longsword the whole time. Another magical weapon. Now, this is a pretty awesome fight. There's not a whole lot of ways to describe it, but Vexen is rolling really well, and so is Brannick. And it was a really awesome, fun fight for me as a DM to have a one-on-one duel with one of my players in a sort of like thematic fashion, and it was great. Vexen ended up pulling out the win because he got a great critical hit. And so the way I remember how he described it, he like stabs the short sword of warning into like his abdomen and then like rips it out of his groin, and like it was pretty awesome. And so whenever Vexen finally defeats Brannick, before he reaches his demise, says the word awaken. And Vexen doesn't know what that means, but he keeps the longsword. So with that, the party then comes down and reunites with Vexen. It's like, whoa, man, that was cool. That was really close, too. But with that, they continue onward past the courtyard. And they finally arrive at the heart of the cavern, just beyond it. The area is filled with rows of husks of humanoids that are mummified and arranged in reverence to a archway of stone engraved in runes. It's so they're kind of like arranged in like rows of like pews, or like pews, like a congregation, I think is the word I used. Now, the party encounters Juniper and the reluctant incubus Harlow and a massive anise hag that have just now completed a incantation. So Brannick was supposed to just sort of slow them down. And with that, the archway erupts into light and reveals the image of the 9 hells. So the arch has just became a gateway to Avernus. Through the gate emerges an emissary of the hells, a creature known as a Narzugon, mounted on a nightmare, which is basically just a infernal, like hellish-looking horse. But a Narzugon is basically a paladin that made a deal with the devils of the Nine Hells. So he's wearing like full plate, but he looks all dark and evil, and he's got like red eyes and stuff, and crazy armor and stuff. So that's him. That's the emissary of the Nine Hells. So now the party realizes they are trying to unleash the Nine Hells onto Wildemount. So this is a pretty big deal. So the party springs into action, and they split up to engage the enemies. So Vorkeef, Xander, and Vexen, they face off against the emissary, being him kind of the most dangerous enemy. Now Elio faces off against the Annis Hag one-on-one because he's a swashbuckling rogue, so he can get in, attack her, and then get away from her. And so he's basically just trying to hold her off because she doesn't behave quite like a normal hag with spells and magic. She mostly relies on her brute strength. She's like a giant hag. So with that, and they also recognize that this Annis hag is one of the three people that they encountered, or one of the three enemies that Vorkeef and Dolamon encountered way back when in Tuasoa in the Marquis mansion. She's one of the three arms of Torag. So with that, Nox's Kid and Wick, they engage Juniper and Harlow at range. They're using their range attacks to try and deal with the two succubus, well, the succubus and the incubus that remain. So once they subdue Harlow and Juniper, they are using the Huss as like cover and like ducking around and hiding behind them. Noctis Kid and Wick help and begin to use their range attacks against the Annis Hag and the emissary. So they kind of split off, and they're both just attacking both of the two main targets. So once the Mount, the Nightmare, is defeated of the emissary, because the emissary is doing a lot of quick moving around, running around, just jumping between attacking Vorkeef and Vexen and Xander. Like, he's really difficult because of that Mount. But once they eliminate that, he's a lot easier to deal with. And Elio ends up finally defeating the Annis Hag, which was pretty impressive. But with that, finally, what's his name? Vorkeef has just been running the Spirit Guardians the whole time, which is a great cleric spell, and he's been using the Devotee Sensor, which I will realize throughout the campaign is my mortal enemy as a dungeon master. The Devotee Sensor is a real son of a bitch weapon. So, anyways, the Devotee Sensor just keeps them healing. So if they get knocked down, they're in the range of the Devotee Sensor, they just get picked back up. It was really funny because it was just a genius moment that he put it all together. But anyways, with that, so the combat is over now. Now, before the armies of the Hells reach the portal, Vorkeef runs in to remove the red gemstone that is seemingly powering the gate from the other side. And so Vorkeef, just thinking on his feet, being a hero that he is, he runs in there and he's going to pull the red gemstone. Now, he meant to sacrifice himself, but Xander, thinking quickly, enters after him and grabs him using the Cape of Mont Blanc to dimension door back through the gate to the material plane. So as soon as Vorkeef grabs the gemstone, he thinks he's just going to pull it and the gate's going to close. But what he doesn't know is Xander, his bro, is right there. He's going to grab him and be like, "I don't think so, buddy. We're getting out of here." And then he just does the dimension door with the gate of Mont Blanc back through the gate. Gate shuts off because the gemstone was pulled. And so with that, essentially, he has in turn closed the gate and rescued Vorkeef from certain death. So, mission successful. But pretty much, that's the end of that recollection, and we'll pick up with the next one. So, until next time, take care.